I used to wake up every morning with this tight knot in my chest, like the world was pressing down on me before I even opened my eyes. Anxiety wasn't just a feeling, it was my shadow, following me everywhere, whispering that I wasn't good enough, that something bad was always around the corner. Depression would tag along too, draining the color out of everything, making even the good days feel like a lie. If you're reading this and nodding, I get it. I've been there, and I know how heavy it can get. Back then, I thought that was just my life, like I'd signed some invisible contract to let anxiety run the show. I'd drag myself through the days, convinced I'd never shake it, that it was baked into who I was. But here's what I didn't see. It wasn't owning me because it had some ultimate power. It was only as big as I let it be. Looking back, I realize I was giving it the keys to my mind, but now I know I can take them back anytime. But here's the thing I didn't realize back then. I wasn't stuck because that's just how life is. I was stuck because I didn't see the bigger picture, the one that's been hiding in plain sight all along. What if I told you that mental health struggles don't have to be your permanent address? They're more like a detour you can navigate around once you understand what's really going on. If this is hitting home for you, I'd love for you to join me over on the Right Psychology channel. Hit that subscribe button so we can keep digging into this stuff together. And while you're at it, drop a comment below. What's one way anxiety shows up in your life that you're ready to rethink? I'll be reading every single one because your story matters and I want to hear it. For the longest time, I thought my mind was this isolated little island, cut off from everything else. I'd sit there, drowning in my own thoughts, convinced that my anxiety was just my problem, my burden to carry alone. But that's not how it works. Your mind isn't some locked box. It's part of something way bigger. Science backs this up, showing how everything in the universe is tied together, even the stuff we can't see. I used to picture my worries as these private battles, like they were born and died inside my head with no one else in on the fight. But the more I looked around, the more I saw how much I was picking up from the world. Stress from a bad day, tension from a crowded room, all of it sneaking in. It's wild to think your brain's not just reacting to you, it's tuned into this invisible web we're all part of. That's when I started wondering if maybe my anxiety wasn't just mine to own. It was a ripple from something larger I could learn to ride out. I'm not gonna bore you with fancy terms, but there's this idea that's been rattling around in my head lately. It's like your thoughts and feelings aren't just bouncing around inside your skull. They're sending out signals, connecting you to the world in ways you don't even notice. When I started seeing it that way, it hit me. Maybe my anxiety wasn't just mine. It was picking up on something bigger, something I could actually shift. You ever feel like the whole planet's problems are sitting on your shoulders? I used to think that every news headline, every bill piling up, every argument I overheard was my personal mess to fix. That's what kept me up at night. My brain running a marathon of worry. Like if I didn't figure it all out, everything would collapse. But here's what I've learned. A lot of that weight isn't even mine to carry. I'd lie there, replaying every little thing. Wars I couldn't stop. Deadlines I couldn't dodge. Stuff I saw online that made my stomach twist. It felt like if I didn't hold it all together, the whole world might just unravel, and somehow that'd be on me. But then I started asking, who decided I'm the one who's got to carry this? Turns out, I was volunteering for a job I didn't need to take. See, we're wired to soak up what's around us. Stress from work, tension in the air, all that noise. I didn't realize how much I was letting it pile on, thinking it was my job to hold it together. Once I saw that, I started asking myself, what if I don't have to take it all on? What if I can let some of it just pass by? I used to beat myself up, thinking I was weak because I couldn't shake the anxiety or the low days. I'd look at other people, smiling, hustling, living their lives, and wonder why I couldn't just flip a switch and be like them. But then it clicked. I wasn't broken. I was just tuned into stuff most people tune out. That's not a flaw. It's a signal. I'd sit there, feeling every little shift, every tense conversation, every bad vibe in the room, like I was some kind of emotional sponge. It wasn't that I was failing at life. It was that I was picking up on things others could shrug off, and that made it all feel so loud. Looking back, I see it wasn't about being fragile. It was about being awake to what's really going on. Now I think of it like a superpower that just needs a little steering. Your mind's like a radio, picking up frequencies all the time. When you're anxious or down, it's not always because you're failing. It's because you're catching the static of the world, the chaos we all swim in. I stopped seeing it as a curse and started seeing it as a heads up, a nudge to pay attention to what I'm letting in. One of the worst parts about those dark days was believing they'd never end. I'd tell myself, this is it. This is who I am now. And that thought alone made everything heavier. It's like I built a cage out of my own expectations, locking myself in with no key. But that's the trick your brain plays. It convinces you the storm's permanent when it's really just passing through. I'd wake up every day feeling the same gray haze, and I'd take it as proof that I was stuck for good. Like I'd signed up for a lifetime membership to misery. The more I bought into that, the tighter the walls got, until I couldn't even imagine a way out. But then I saw it. I wasn't trapped by the feelings. I was trapped by the story I kept telling myself about them. It's funny how your mind can turn a rough patch into a life sentence if you let it. I don't know when it hit me, but at some point I realized I was the one keeping the door shut. The anxiety, the depression, they weren't life sentences. They were waves, and waves always move on. That shift in how I saw it didn't fix everything overnight, but it cracked the cage open just enough to let some light in. Here's something that blew my mind when I figured it out. I was making it worse without even realizing it. Every time I'd obsess over why I felt so bad, or replay every little thing that went wrong, I was feeding the beast. It's like I was handing my anxiety a megaphone and saying, "Go ahead, take over." And it did, because I let it. I'd sit there for hours, picking apart every moment. Why I said that dumb thing at work, why I couldn't sleep, why the day just felt off. Each time I did, it was like tossing logs on a fire I wanted to put out, keeping it roaring when I could have let it die down. Looking back, I see how I was stuck in this loop, giving it energy I didn't even know I was spending. It's wild how you can be your own worst enemy without a clue. I'm not saying it's your fault. Trust me, I'd never put that on you. But there's this sneaky way we keep the cycle going, pouring energy into the very thing we want to escape. When I started noticing that, I saw I had a choice. Keep fueling the fire or start starving it out. You ever stop and listen to what's around you? I mean, really listen. The constant buzz of notifications, the doom scrolling on your phone, the chatter about how everything's falling apart. I didn't notice how much of that was seeping into my head, setting the tone for my days. It was like I'd let the world's noise become my personal soundtrack, and it was all static. I'd catch myself glued to the screen, soaking up every headline about chaos or every rant about what's wrong with everything. It wasn't just background noise, it was sinking in, turning my mood into this jittery mess I couldn't shake. The more I let it play, the more it felt like I was living someone else's panic instead of my own rhythm. I didn't even realize I was signing up for that playlist until it was on repeat. Once I caught on, I started wondering, what if I don't have to dance to that tune? What if I can pick a different station, one that doesn't leave me feeling like I'm sinking? That's when I knew I had to get intentional about what I let in, because that noise wasn't just background, it was shaping me. I used to think I had to fix myself, like I was some broken machine that needed new parts. I'd spend hours trying to figure out what was wrong, what switch I could flip to make the anxiety stop. But chasing that fix was exhausting, and it never really worked. It just kept me spinning in circles. Then I realized something. I didn't need to fix anything. I needed to shift. I'd dig into every bad day like it was a puzzle I had to solve, convinced if I found the right piece, I'd be whole again. But all that digging just left me tired, stuck in this loop of overthinking that didn't change a thing. It hit me one day. Maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just pointed in the wrong direction, and all I needed was to turn a little. It's less about patching up holes and more about moving towards something wider. It's not about erasing the bad feelings. They're part of being human. It's about moving the dial, changing how much space they take up in your head. When I stopped fighting them and started redirecting my focus, the weight started lifting, not all at once, but enough to breathe again. I can't tell you how many times I defined myself by my lowest moments. I'd look in the mirror and see anxious me or depressed me, like that was the whole story. It's easy to get stuck there, thinking your worst days are who you are, but they're not. They're just chapters, not the book. I'd replay those rough patches over and over, letting them paint this picture of me as someone who couldn't get it together. Every time I stumbled, it felt like evidence I was doomed to stay small, like the good stuff didn't count. But then I started noticing the other side. Those quiet wins, the days I pushed through anyway, and it dawned on me I'd been ignoring half the story. I wasn't just the mess, I was the one still here despite it. I started catching glimpses of something else. Moments where I laughed, where I felt strong, where I wasn't drowning. Those weren't flukes. They were proof there's more to me than the struggle. And if there's more to me, there's more to you too. You're not just the hard stuff. I held on to so much crap without even realizing it. Old regrets, what ifs, stuff people said that cut deep. It was like I was carrying a backpack full of rocks, wondering why I couldn't move forward. Anxiety loves that baggage. It thrives on it, keeps you looking back instead of ahead. But here's what I found. Letting go isn't weakness, it's power. I'd cling to those old wounds like they were some kind of twisted treasure, replaying them until they felt like part of me. Every should have done better, or why did that happen, was another rock I stuffed in, slowing me down without me even clocking it. Then I saw it holding on wasn't keeping me safe. It was keeping me stuck. And dropping that weight was the strongest thing I could do. It's crazy how much lighter you feel when you stop hauling around yesterday. I'm not saying it's easy. God knows it took me forever to drop even one of those rocks. But every time I did, I felt lighter, like I was giving myself permission to step out of the past. It's not about forgetting. It's about not letting it steer the ship anymore. If this is ringing true for you, come hang out with me on the Right Psychology channel. Subscribe so we can keep unpacking this together. And hey, drop a comment below. What's one thing you're holding on to that you're ready to let go of? I'm dying to hear your take. So let's get that conversation going in the comments. For years, I thought I had to tough it out solo. Like asking for help was admitting defeat. I'd sit there, wrestling with my head, convinced I was the only one who could sort it out. But that's a lie we tell ourselves, and it keeps us isolated, sinking deeper. The truth is, we're not built to carry it all by ourselves. I'd lock myself away, thinking I had to be some kind of lone warrior, figuring it out in silence while the weight just piled on. It wasn't noble, it was stubborn, and it left me spinning my wheels, too proud to reach out. Then I realized I wasn't protecting myself by going it alone. I was just making the hole deeper. Turns out, letting someone in doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. I started opening up, not to everyone, just a few people I trusted. It was like cracking a window in a stuffy room. They didn't fix me, but they reminded me I wasn't alone in the mess. Sometimes, that's all it takes. A voice saying, I see you, and it's okay. You ever notice how some places just feel heavy? I'd walk into a room full of stress or negativity, and it'd stick to me like damp clothes. I didn't see how much my surroundings were messing with my head. Work, home, even the people I hung out with. It's not just in your mind. It's in the air you breathe. I used to think I could power through it, like I was immune to the vibes of a tense office or a gloomy house. But the truth is, that stuff seeps in. Every sharp word, every cluttered corner, it all adds up and drags you down. I'd leave those places feeling like I'd run a marathon, not realizing I was soaking up the chaos like a sponge. It's wild how much your space can turn the volume up on your struggles. I started paying attention to that, noticing where I felt worse and where I could actually relax. It's not about running away. It's about knowing what's weighing you down and finding spots where you can catch your breath. That little shift made a bigger difference than I expected. I used to think time was my enemy. Like every day I didn't get better was a failure. I'd count the hours I spent feeling off, like they were proof I was doomed to stay that way. But time's not a cage. It's a river, and it's always moving. I just had to stop fighting the current. I'd watch the clock tick by, beating myself up for every minute I wasn't fixed, like I was racing some invisible deadline to be okay. It felt like I was falling behind, stuck in quicksand, while everyone else moved on. But then it hit me. Time wasn't holding me hostage. It was giving me room to figure it out, one slow step at a time. All those hours weren't wasted. They were building something I couldn't see yet. Now I see it differently. Every minute I'm still here, I'm getting another shot to tilt the scales. It's not about instant wins. It's about the slow drift towards something better. That takes the pressure off, lets me ride it out instead of drowning in it. Looking back, I can't believe how much I've carried. Days where I didn't want to get out of bed. Nights where the worry wouldn't shut up. I didn't feel strong then. I felt like I was barely hanging on. But here I am, still standing, and that's not nothing. If you're reading this, you've got that strength too. You just don't see it yet. I used to think surviving those moments was just luck, like I'd stumbled through by accident. Not because I had it in me, but every time I made it past a rough patch, every tear, every sleepless night, it was me pushing forward, even when I didn't know I was doing it. It's not about feeling invincible. It's about showing up anyway, and I've done that more times than I can count. That's the kind of strength that sneaks up on you, quiet but real. It's not about never feeling the weight. It's about knowing you can hold it and keep going. I didn't beat anxiety or depression. They're still around sometimes. But I've learned they don't own me. And they don't own you either. I'm not gonna pretend I've got it all figured out. Some days are still rough, and that's okay. But the difference now is I don't see those struggles as the end of the story. They're just part of it, and I've got a say in how it plays out. That's the shift I'm talking about. Not a cure, but a change in how I carry it. I used to think I'd only be free when the bad days stopped coming, like I was waiting for some perfect version of myself to show up. But waiting kept me stuck, missing the fact that I was already moving every time I got up, every time I kept going. That was the shift happening. It's not loud or flashy. It's this quiet thing building under the surface, piece by piece. I didn't need to wait for a big win to feel it was there all along, growing. You don't have to wait for some big breakthrough to start feeling it either. It's already in you, that quiet push that keeps you going even when you don't notice. All it takes is seeing it for what it is, a sign you're more than the mess. I used to think I was trapped, like anxiety and depression had drawn a line I couldn't cross. But the more I looked at it, the more I saw it wasn't a wall. It was a starting point. You're not stuck where you are. You're just at the edge of something new. And that's not a bad place to be. I'd stare at my life like it was some dead-end road, convinced I'd hit a brick wall with no way through. Every tough day felt like proof I was going nowhere. But then I realized it wasn't the end. It was where I kick things off. All that struggle? It's not a stop sign. It's the ground I'm launching from. And that changes everything. So yeah, the knot in my chest still shows up sometimes, but it doesn't scare me like it used to. I know now it's not the boss of me. It's just a visitor, and I decide how long it stays. You've got that power too. Maybe you just haven't claimed it yet. Here's the bottom line. Mental health struggles don't have to run the show. I've learned they're not the whole picture, just a piece of it, and I get to decide how big that piece is. You're not a passenger in your own head. You're the one steering, even when it doesn't feel like it. I used to hand over the wheel, letting anxiety and depression call the shots, thinking that's just how it'd always be. But every time I took it back, even just for a minute, I saw I could turn things in a different direction, one I actually wanted to go. It's not about wiping them out. It's about choosing how much they get to say. And that choice is all mine. You've got the same shot at shaping it every single day. So next time that weight creeps in, remember this. It's not here to stay unless you let it. I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying it's possible because I'm living it, and you can too.